Hi, my name is Bobby Ebsen, and I am here today to talk to you about living a life of sobriety. One of the reasons it's important to live a life of sobriety is because whenever we ingest any substance or any kind of altering of consciousness, we go into a state called dissociation. So whenever somebody drinks a glass of wine or they eat an edible, we consider that in therapy terms that they are in a dissociative state. And a dissociative state is if you've ever driven your car from point A to point B and you don't really remember how you got there, you were dissociating. Or if you've ever been under so much stress that you find yourself, going for a walk and you're talking to yourself out loud, that's dissociation. Dissociation really started when, kids are under a lot of stress, and it's so harmful to the physical body, the abuse or the stress that they're receiving, that they teach themselves to check out of the physical body and they go into a dissociative state. And you've probably read accounts of sexual abuse survivors who say, like, when they were experiencing the abuse, they could see themselves on top of the ceiling, like looking down at their body. And that's kind of extreme dissociation, but that's dissociation. Or sometimes when people are talking to you and you're not hearing everything, and then somebody says, are you listening to me? And you realize you haven't heard anything they said. That's dissociation. As is drinking alcohol, taking edibles, any of the new, I can never say the right word, but it's microdosing of mushrooms and San Rafael and San Pedro, and shopping. Sometimes food can be a substance that will lead you into dissociation, spending money, anything that you are not totally present is dissociation. And so how dissociation hurts us, because a lot of times people will say, yeah, but I like the effects. Like, I love to be like in that zone of, I am like up in the air and my body is here on earth and I'm not aware of really what's going on. I love to be in that state. But the problem with that state is, number one, you could get hurt. Like, you're in a really vulnerable position when you're in that kind of a dissociative state. Two, you cannot create anything in your life. So when you want to create something in your life, whether it's like a new business idea or the relationship that you hope for, or it's something else, it takes a lot of power to create that in your life. Like, a lot of people say, I want to create an abundant life. What I say is, you're going to have to throw your weight into it. Like, you got to put your power into it. You got to get focused, and it helps to get angry. I find, like, if you get really pissed about the way your life is right now and you take that energy and you push it into what you want to create, that's really powerful. But it takes mindfulness, and you have to be really, really awake to do that. You have to be present. You have to be focused. And when you're in a dissociative state, you can't do that. You absolutely cannot do that. You cannot throw 100% of your weight into creating something when you are drinking or taking edibles or using other vices. And that's why it's dangerous. And I sometimes tell people, if you're going to check out, if you really have to dissociate because your week was so stressful, then do something that has a short recovery time, like binge on Netflix one weekend, because you can still get up on Monday and go to work without having a hangover. And you didn't just, wipe out your checking account on a shopping spree. So do something if you have to do something with a short recovery time, but preferably you learn to live a life that's in balance, that's well grounded, so that you don't check out into a dissociative state. Now, if you're dissociating and you just cannot control it, that's trauma. And that you really need professional help for, because sometimes people do dissociate, but they cannot control it at all. And that tells us as trauma specialists that you've really got to get in and see a professional for that. But getting back to substance abuse, the way we look at people who use things to dissociate, like alcohol or marijuana or shopping or food or whatever, they have an underlying trauma problem. There's something that is so stressful or so harmful or so hurtful that the body cannot handle it. And so they're doing what sexual abuse survivors do, only they're not doing it automatically. They're taking something to force their body into a dissociative state, like drugs, alcohol, sex, pornography, whatever, you name it, gambling. And so when you have done that and taken a substance, you really have two problems you're dealing with, because you have the problem that's creating you to want to dissociate in an unnatural way. And then you have the substance problem as well. And over time, if you keep putting in a substance that has addictive qualities in it, eventually you will become dependent on it psychologically or physically. A lot of people will deny this. And I have seen really elaborate, complex denial systems. That's what I call them, is denial systems, because it really takes a forest, a sick forest for addiction to grow. And I say that because there's always enablers involved in the addiction. So we call it dependency and codependency. It's kind of like one can't really happen without the other. And so they all live under the smoke of a complex denial system. So I'm not going to talk too much more of that today, but I did want to talk about EMDR therapy, because EMDR therapy is very effective, so helpful with trauma. It's like really, it's a strange type of therapy, but it works really, really well with trauma. But it has also been proven to reduce cravings and urges for substances, which would be so helpful, because once you become dependent on a substance, it is a monkey on your back to get it out of your system. It's really, really hard. Addictive substances are really powerful. I think they used to call alcohol spirits, because when people ingested them, it was like a spirit took over their body and they became a different person. They're really, 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 really hard to beat. But we do have really great tools to help people with substance problems now. And one of them is this new EMDR protocol that helps reduce cravings and urges. You still need your group support and your either your AA or your 12-step community or some other sober community that is going to hold you accountable. That's the hard part, is you can kind of talk yourself out of, being sober, and maybe it's not that bad. And, there's like this whole, they say it's stinking thinking, and addiction really starts with how you think about it. And you need help and support in order to combat that. But in addition to that, you can also use this EMDR protocol to reduce cravings and urges. Because what we have learned is once you have this problem that it's probably wrapped in shame and negative beliefs about yourselves, which are really, really toxic and hurtful to the individual. And then you take a substance of some kind to dissociate so you can check out. And then you come off of that substance and you start feeling that problem again. So you go back to the substance and use it until it wears off. And then you start creating this loop that goes around, and it happens in your brain. And then it becomes this neuron firing loop in your brain. And what we know about trauma is that when neurons start firing together, they wire together. So now you've just created this whole neurological package of firing around in your brain. That's why it becomes so difficult to beat addiction, is because you have all of this neurological wiring that's going on as well. That's why we have to take all the shame, all the blame, all the judgment, and get it off of the person, because it's really, really is really, really hard to beat. EMDR is super helpful in the process of loosening up those wirings and freeing up the brain again. And so I really wanted to spend this time with you, just a little bit of time, to encourage you to live a life of sobriety and to have hope that you will join me in this life of sobriety. My name is Bobby Ebsen, and I am the owner of Bobby Ebsen Psychotherapy, and I hope you have a great day.